Most of us grow up learning the same lesson. If something isn't working, try harder. If you're uncertain, make a better plan. If you're falling behind, move faster. And if you're unhappy with where you are, improve yourself until you finally get somewhere better. For a while, this works. It helps us finish school, build careers, pay bills, solve problems, get things done. But eventually, something strange can happen. You try so hard to make the right decision that you can barely make a decision at all. You work so hard to protect what you've built that you forget to enjoy it. You plan the future so carefully that anything unexpected starts to feel like a threat. And without really noticing it, life becomes something you're constantly managing, instead of something you're actually living. More than 2,000 years ago, thinkers associated with what we now call Taoism were already suspicious of this need to control everything. Two of the most important texts are the Daodejing, traditionally associated with Laozi, and the Zhuangzi, named after the philosopher Zhuangzi. They're very different books. The Daodejing is short, compressed, sometimes mysterious. The Zhuangzi is stranger. It's full of stories, jokes, dreams, odd characters, and ideas that don't always make sense the first time you hear them. But both keep returning to one question. What happens when we stop trying to force life into the shape we think it should have? That question still matters, maybe more now than ever. So here are 7 Taoist principles that can change the way you see your life. Not because there's 7 new rules you need to follow. Taoism isn't really interested in giving you more rules. If anything, it might help you let go of a few. The first principle is simple. Life doesn't hold still for you. We often talk about life as if it's somewhere we're eventually going to arrive. Once I get the job, then I'll relax. Once I make enough money, then things will settle down. Once I move. Once the kids grow up. Once I finally figure myself out, then life will feel stable. But it rarely works that way. You become good at your job, and the job changes. You become comfortable in a relationship, and the relationship changes. Your body changes. Your parents change. Your priorities change. Even the things you wanted 5 years ago may no longer fit who you are today. The word Tao is often translated as the way. But the way is not simply a road leading towards some final destination. It's closer to the way life unfolds. The movement itself. Day becomes night. Summer becomes autumn. Things grow. Things decline. Things disappear. And sometimes, they return in another form. We understand this intellectually, but emotionally, we keep asking life not to move. When things are going well, we want them to stay exactly as they are. When things are going badly, we want them to change immediately. Either way, we are arguing with movement, and movement usually wins. So instead of asking, how do I keep this exactly as it is? Maybe ask, what is happening now? And what is this becoming? It's a small change in language, but sometimes it creates a lot of space. The second principle is about effort. Not everything improves when you push harder. One of the best-known Taoist ideas is Wu Wei. It's often translated as non-action, and that translation can make it sound as though Taoism is telling you to sit around and do nothing. That's not really the point. Wu Wei is closer to acting without unnecessary force. You still act. You still make decisions. You still work. But you stop assuming that more effort is always better. The Zhuangzi tells a famous story about a cook named Ding. Cook Ding is carving an ox for a ruler, but he doesn't hack through it. He has worked for so long and understands the animal so well that his knife moves naturally through the spaces between the joints. He follows the structure. He doesn't fight it. An ordinary cook damages his knife by constantly cutting through bone. Cook Ding's blade lasts for years because he doesn't keep forcing it where it doesn't belong. There is something painfully familiar about that. Think about how often we keep pushing, simply because stopping feels like failure. A relationship becomes strained, so we explain ourselves again and again and again. We send another message. We try one more time to make the other person understand. A project at work is falling apart, so everyone adds more meetings, more reports, more pressure. You're lying awake at 2 in the morning, desperate to sleep, and your mind keeps saying, I need to sleep. Why can't I sleep? I have to sleep now. And somehow, the effort to sleep becomes the thing keeping you awake. Wu Wei doesn't tell you never to make an effort. It asks a more uncomfortable question. Is your effort helping? Or are you pushing because you don't know what else to do? Those are very different things. The third principle is one of Taoism's most famous images. Become more like water. Water doesn't look strong. You can put your hand through it. It doesn't stand upright. It moves downward, toward the places people usually avoid. If a rock blocks a stream, the water doesn't stop and argue with the rock. It moves around it, sometimes over it, sometimes under it. And if you come back years later, the rock may be the thing that has changed. This goes against much of what we're taught about strength. We admire people who are firm, certain, unmoving. Someone says, this is who I am. This is what I believe. I never quit. And sometimes that's admirable. But sometimes refusing to bend isn't strength. It's rigidity. A manager uses the same leadership style, even though the team has changed. A parent speaks to an adult child as if they're still 15. Someone stays in the same career for 10 years. Because changing direction would mean admitting that the old plan no longer fits. Water doesn't have that problem. It changes shape without losing its nature. That's a different kind of strength. Not the ability to remain unchanged. The ability to change without losing yourself. The fourth principle is one modern life desperately needs. Leave some things empty. The Daodejing gives us a simple image. A bowl is useful because of the empty space inside it. A room is useful because of the space between the walls. A wheel works because there is an opening at its center. We usually notice what is there. The clay, the wood, the walls. But Taoism points toward what isn't there, the empty part. Because sometimes, that is what makes everything else useful. Modern life is very good at removing emptiness. 5 minutes before a meeting, check your phone. Standing in an elevator, check your phone. Eating alone, put on a video. Driving, podcast. Walking, music. Waiting for someone, messages. Even a few seconds of silence can start to feel uncomfortable. But silence used to do something. It gave thoughts time to arrive before we replaced them with someone else's thoughts. You don't need to throw away your phone. You don't need to move to a mountain. Start smaller. Take a walk with nothing in your ears. Sit for 10 minutes without trying to improve the moment. When someone tells you they're struggling, don't immediately give them 5 solutions. Let them finish. Sometimes space is not an absence of something useful. Sometimes the space itself is useful. The fifth principle is about judgment. Be careful about calling something good or bad too soon. We are incredibly fast at turning events into conclusions. You don't get the job. Bad. Someone leaves you. Bad. You make more money. Good. Your business grows. Good. You get rejected. Bad. You get accepted. Good. Of course. Some things really are painful. Some things really are fortunate. Taoism doesn't ask us to pretend otherwise. But the Zhuangzi repeatedly questions how quickly we believe we understand what an event means. You see one part of the story, then life keeps moving, and the meaning changes. Think about your own life. Maybe something you desperately wanted didn't happen. At the time, you hated it. Years later, you can see that if it had happened, your whole life might have gone in a direction you no longer wanted. Or maybe you got exactly what you wanted. The job, the relationship, the opportunity. And only later did you discover the price attached to it. This doesn't mean everything happens for a reason. We don't know that. It simply means we often don't know enough yet. You can be disappointed without deciding that your life is going badly. You can be excited without deciding that everything has finally worked out. Sometimes the most accurate sentence is simply, I don't know yet. And strangely, there is peace in that. The sixth principle may be one of the hardest. Learn what enough feels like. There is always another level. You get the apartment you wanted. Then you see someone else's house. You reach the salary you once dreamed about. And within a year, it feels normal. You reach 10,000 subscribers. Then start watching channels with 100,000. You finish one project. And before you've even enjoyed it, you're already thinking about the next one. The number changes. The feeling doesn't. The Daodejing returns again and again to simplicity, moderation, and knowing when enough is enough. That's not a glamorous message. Enough doesn't sell very well. Most advertising depends on convincing you that enough is just slightly beyond what you already have. But constantly moving the finish line comes with a cost. You never arrive anywhere. You just pass through achievements on your way to wanting another one. That doesn't mean ambition is bad. Some things are worth building. Some goals are worth pursuing. The question is whether you can still feel satisfied when something is enough. Can a good meal simply be a good meal? Can a quiet weekend be enough? Can you finish something and leave it finished for a moment? Can you own something without immediately comparing it to the better version? The person who needs very little isn't always poor. Sometimes they're the only person in the room who isn't constantly hungry. And that brings us to the seventh principle. Stop performing every part of your life. Another important Taoist idea is Ziren. It's usually translated as naturalness or spontaneity. It carries the feeling of something being what it is, without constantly being forced into an image. That's harder than it sounds, because a lot of adult life becomes performance. We perform competence at work, confidence in social situations, success online, happiness in photographs. Sometimes, we even perform relaxation. There are people who can't take a quiet vacation without turning the vacation into content. At some point, it's worth asking yourself, how much of what I want is actually mine? Not what looks impressive, not what other people around me want, not what seemed important when I was 22. What do I actually enjoy now? Who do I enjoy spending time with when there is nothing to gain? What kind of work makes an ordinary Tuesday feel decent? Not the job title. The actual day. What would I still care about if nobody could see it? Taoist writing sometimes uses the image of the uncarved block. Something simple. Before it has been cut, shaped, polished, labeled, and turned into what someone else decided it should be. None of us can return to some perfectly untouched version of ourselves. Life shapes us. That's unavoidable. But sometimes we can notice where we've become overshaped, where we're maintaining an identity that no longer fits, where we're saying yes, because that's what the person we've become is supposed to say. Sometimes growth means adding something, and sometimes growth means putting something down. Now let's make all of this practical. Imagine you've been working toward a promotion for 2 years. You stayed late, took on extra projects, answered emails at night, covered for other people. You've already imagined the new title. Maybe you've imagined the salary too. Then one afternoon, your manager calls you in. Someone else got the position. You walk back to your desk, and everything starts happening at once. Anger, embarrassment, jealousy, self-doubt. And then the stories arrive. I've wasted 2 years. They don't value me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Everyone else is moving ahead. I need to prove them wrong. This is usually the moment when people do something quickly. Send an angry email. Work even harder. Quit immediately. Apply for 30 jobs that night. But Taoism might suggest something else. First, remember that life is moving. This decision is one moment. It is not the final description of your career. Then look at Wu Wei. You've already spent 2 years pushing. Maybe the answer isn't automatically to push twice as hard. Maybe you need to stop long enough to see clearly. Then think like water. If this path is blocked, what other paths exist? Another team? Another company? Another kind of work? Then create some empty space. Don't decide your future at 6:30 in the evening. While you're angry, go home. Eat. Sleep. Give it a day. There are decisions that become better simply because you don't make them immediately. And don't judge the event too quickly. Getting passed over hurts. You don't need to pretend otherwise. But you still don't know what this moment will become. Then ask the uncomfortable question. Did you really want the job? The actual responsibilities? The daily work? Or did you mostly want the title because it proved you were moving forward? And finally, return to something more natural. Ask yourself, what kind of work do I want to spend my ordinary Tuesday doing? Not the work that sounds impressive at dinner. The real day? The meetings? The pace? The people? The problems? Maybe you stay. Maybe you leave. Maybe you ask for more money. Maybe you realize the promotion mattered less than you thought. Taoism can't make that decision for you. The point is that when you finally act, you're responding to reality. You're not simply reacting to fear. And here is where I think Taoism becomes especially interesting today. There is something strange about the way we sometimes use ancient philosophy. We take a tradition that speaks about simplicity, non-forcing, humility, and freedom from excessive desire, and turn it into another productivity system. Use Wu Wei to work faster. Use Taoism to achieve more. Use detachment to become more successful. Some of that may be useful, but I think it misses something important. Sometimes the problem is not that you're playing the game badly. Sometimes you've never stopped to ask whether you want to play that game at all. We spend much of our lives adding things. More goals. More habits. More money. More responsibilities. More expectations. And because adding looks like progress, we rarely question it. Taoism suggests another possibility. Take something away. Leave something unfinished. Say no. Stop explaining. Let someone misunderstand you. Let the argument end without having the last word. Keep an afternoon empty. Give up a goal that belonged to an earlier version of yourself. Not because you're lazy, because not everything deserves your energy. Just because you once started giving it energy. For me, that's one of the most useful things Taoist philosophy offers. It doesn't always ask, what should you do next? Sometimes it asks, what could you finally stop doing? Life will still be messy. Plans will still go wrong. People will leave. You'll change your mind. You'll want things you can't have. And sometimes you'll get exactly what you wanted, only to discover it wasn't what you expected. No philosophy removes all of that. And Taoism isn't trying to. What it offers is a different way of standing inside life. A little less force. A little more room. The willingness to bend before you break. The patience to let an event mean more than the first story you tell about it. The ability to notice when enough has quietly arrived. And maybe the courage to live some parts of your life without needing anybody else to see them. You don't have to hold everything so tightly. Some things survive better in an open hand. So let me leave you with one simple question. Which feels hardest for you right now? Letting go, slowing down, or accepting change?